Hello everyone, we are Group 6 and we're here to present Ida Jean Orlando.
Ida Jean Orlando was an internationally known psychiatric health nurse, theorist, and researcher who developed the deliberate nursing process theory. Her theory allows nurses to create an effective nursing care plan that can also be easily adapted when and if any complications arise with patients. Ida Jean Orlando was first-generation Irish American, born on August 12, 1926. While studying, she also worked intermittently and sometimes concurrently as staff nurse in OB, MS, ER, as a supervisor in general hospital, and as assistant director and teacher of several courses. And in 1961, she was married to Robert Felicia and lived in the Boston area. As for being respectable and credible role model, Orlando was well educated with many advanced degrees in nursing. In 1947, she received a diploma in nursing from Flowerfield Avenue Hospital School of Nursing in New York. In 1951, she received a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Health Nursing from St. John's University in Brooklyn in New York. And in 1954, Orlando received a Master's of Arts degree in Mental Health Consultation from Teachers College, Columbia University. Ida Jean Orlando developed a deliberative nursing process that allowed nurses to formulate an effective nursing care plan that can also be easily adapted when and if any complexity comes up with a patient. Orlando's theory stresses the reciprocal relationship between patient and nurse. It emphasizes the critical importance of the patient's participation in nursing process. Orlando also considered nursing as a distinct profession and separated it from medicine, where nursing as determined nursing action rather than being processed by physicians' orders, organizational need, and past personal experiences. She believed that physicians' orders are for patients and not for nurses. She proposed that patients have their own meaning and interpretation of situation, and therefore nurses must validate their inference and analysis with patients before drawing conclusions. Orlando's goal is to develop a theory of effective nursing practice. The theory explained that the role of nurse is to find out and meet the patient's immediate need for help. According to the theory, all patient behavior can be a cry for help. Through this, nurse's job is to find out the nature of patient's distress and provide the help he or she needs. Orlando's model of nursing makes the following assumptions. There are 13 of them. When a patient are unable to cope with their needs on their own, they become distressed by feeling of helplessness. In its professional character, nurses add to the distress of the patient. Patients are unique and individual on how they respond. Nursing offers mothering and nursing analog to an adult who mothers and nurtures a child. The practice of nursing deals with people, environment, and health. Patients need help communicating their needs. They are uncomfortable and ambivalent about their dependency needs. People are able to be secretive or explicit about their needs, perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. The nurse-patient situation is dynamic. Action and reaction are influenced by both the nurse and patient. People attach meanings to situations and actions that aren't apparent to others. Patient enters into nursing care through medicine. The patient is unable to state the nature and meaning of his or her distress without the help of the nurse, or without him or her first having established helpful relationship with the patient. Any observation shared and observed with the patient is immediately helpful in ascertaining and meeting his or her needs, or finding out that he or she is not in need at that time. Nurses are concerned with the needs the patient is unable to meet on his or her own.
Major concepts of the theory. The nursing meta-paradigm consists of 4 concepts: person, environment, health, and nursing. Of the 4 concepts, Orlando only included 3 in her theory of nursing process discipline: person, health, and nursing. Orlando uses the concepts of human as she emphasizes individuality and the dynamic nature of the nurse-patient relationship. For her, humans in need are the focus of nursing practice. In Orlando's theory, health is replaced by a sense of helplessness as the initiator of a necessity for nursing. She stated that nursing deals with individuals who are in need of help. Orlando speaks of nursing as unique and independent in its concern for an individual's need for help in an immediate situation. The efforts to meet the individual's need for help are carried out in an interactive situation and in a disciplined manner that requires proper training. Subconcepts. Orlando described her model as revolving around the following 5 major interrelated concepts: function of professional nursing, presenting behavior, immediate reaction, nursing process discipline, and improvement. The function of professional nursing is finding out and meeting the patient's immediate needs for help. According to Orlando, nursing is responsive to individuals who suffer or who anticipate a sense of helplessness. It is focused on the process of care in an immediate experience and is concerned with providing direct assistance to a patient in whatever settings they are found in for the purpose of avoiding, improving, or curing the sense of helplessness in the patient. The nursing process discipline theory labels the purpose of nursing to supply the help a patient needs for his or her needs to be met. If the patient has an immediate need for help and the nurse discovers and meets that need, the purpose of nursing has been achieved. Presenting behavior is the patient's problematic situation. Through the presenting behavior, the nurse finds the patient's immediate need for help. To do this, the nurse must first recognize the situation as problematic. Regardless of how the presenting behavior appears, it may represent a cry for help from the patient. The presenting behavior of the patient, which is considered the stimulus, causes an automatic internal response in the nurse, which in turn causes a response in the patient. The immediate reaction is the internal response. The patient perceives objects with his or her 5 senses. These perceptions stimulate automatic thought, and each thought stimulates an automatic feeling, causing the patient to act. These 3 items are the patient's immediate response. The immediate response reflects how the nurse experiences his or her participation in the nurse-patient relationship. The patient behavior stimulated a nurse reaction, which makes the beginning of the nursing process discipline. When the nurse acts, an action process transpires. This action process by the nurse in a nurse-patient contact is called a nursing process. The nurse's action may be automatic or deliberative. The nursing process discipline is the investigation into the patient's needs. Any observation shared and explored with the patient is immediately useful in ascertaining and meeting his or her need, or finding out he or she has no needs at that time. The nurse cannot assume that any aspect of his or her reaction to the patient is correct, helpful, or appropriate until he or she checks the validity of it by exploring it with the patient. The nurse initiates this exploration to determine how the patient is affected by what he or she says and does. Automatic reactions are ineffective because the nurse's action is determined for reasons other than the meaning of the patient's behavior or the patient's immediate need for help. When the nurse doesn't explore the patient's reaction with him or her, it is reasonably certain that effective communication between nurse and patient stops. Improvement is the resolution to the patient's situation. In the resolution, the nurse's actions are not evaluated. Instead, the result of his or her action are evaluated to determine whether his or her action served to help the patient communicate his or her needs for help and how it was met. In each contact, the nurse repeats a process of learning how he or she can help the patient. The nurse's own individuality as well as that of the patient requires going through this each time the nurse is called upon to render services to those who need him or her.
5 stages of the deliberative nursing process. The deliberative nursing process has 5 stages, namely assessment, diagnosis, planning, implementation, and evaluation. Assessment. In the assessment stage, the nurse completes a holistic assessment of the patient's needs. This is done without taking the reason for the encounter into consideration. The nurse uses a nursing framework to collect both subjective and objective data about the patient. Diagnosis. The diagnosis stage uses the nurse's clinical judgment about health problems. The diagnosis can then be confirmed using links to defining characteristics, related factors, and risk factors found in the patient's assessment. Planning. The planning stage addresses each of the problems identified in the diagnosis. Each problem is given a specific goal or outcome, and each goal or outcome is given nursing interventions to help achieve the goal. By the end of this stage, the nurse will have a nursing care plan. Implementation. In the implementation stage, the nurse begins using the nursing care plan. Evaluation. Finally, in the evaluation stage, the nurse looks at the progress of the patient toward the goal set in the nursing care plan. Changes can be made to the nursing care plan based on how well or how poorly the patient is progressing toward the goals. If any new problems are identified in the evaluation stage, they can be addressed and the process starts over again for those specific problems. Case scenario. Mrs. Saw, a 35-year-old patient, underwent total abdominal hysterectomy and is one day post-op. She mentioned that she does not have any relatives living in the country, and her husband is in China for work and will not be back until next month. She is living with her 3 boys until she was brought to the hospital for the emergency operation. At 6 a.m., she stated that her pain level was 4 out of 10 after the pain medication was administered. Her abdominal dressing is stained with dried dark red drainage. Her vitals at 10 a.m. were temperature 37 degrees centigrade, pulse 110, respiration 28, blood pressure 130/76, oxygen saturation level at 97%. Her Foley was also removed at 6 a.m. and she has not voided since then. She has morphine sulfate 5 mg IV to 3 hours PRN for pain. She is on a clear liquid diet and her vital signs are taken every 4 hours. At 2 p.m., she requested another medication, stating that her pain level is 7 out of 10. As the nurse was providing care to Mrs. Saw, you notice that something is bothering her aside from the pain.
Application of Orlando's theory in the assessment phase. During the assessment phase, the patient stated that she is in pain and later on stated that she is worried about her 3 boys. As the nurse recognized the client's reaction as problematic, she responds to the client's cry for help. She comprehends the problem within the client, which is hidden in her presenting behavior to the nurse. So the nurse chose to analyze the client's condition or mindset about the pain by asking her to rank the pain on a scale of 1 to 10. For the diagnosis phase, we already know that the patient has anxiety that is related to the crisis she is experiencing, as evidenced by her increased heart rate and respiratory rate. She also has acute pain due to her operation, as evidenced by her pain level of 7 out of 10. So, as the nurse was able to understand this, that aside from the pain she's experiencing, there is another issue that needs to be resolved. Therefore, After addressing the patient's pain, the nurse then explores the client's situation through conversation to better understand the issue. During the conversation with the client, the nurse was able to identify stress in the client about the security of her children. The nurse chose to resolve this problem by helping her communicate with her children through a phone call. Client goals. Her goals are to decrease the pain she is experiencing and at the same time to ensure the safety of her children. Client evaluation. The interventions that was mentioned above greatly helped the patient in resolving her issues.
In conclusion, Orlando's deliberative nursing process theory stresses the relationship between the nurse and the patient, wherein what they say and do affects them both. She sees the professional function of nursing as finding out and meeting the patient's immediate need for help. The focus of her theory is on how to produce improvement in the patient's behavior. It is the most effective theory that helped new nurses in achieving more successful patient outcomes.